Welcome to The Liberation Effect with me, your host, Helen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Liberation Effect. Today, I am welcoming Emma, who got in touch because she wanted to talk about letting go of the anger and dealing with the bereavement of having had a narcissistic mother, being denied the kind of childhood that she should have had, her own child being denied a grandparent, and an enabling father. Emma, why don't I just hand it over to you and ask you, what is it you're looking to get from our time together today?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me today. It's a great pleasure to be here. And the reason that I wanted to do this podcast was because since my mother's gone no contact with me, actually, because I was trying to put in some boundaries and challenging some of her behaviour that I didn't think was very appropriate. And so it resulted in her becoming quite annoyed with me and feeling like she was the victim of me being mean to her, when actually I was just trying to stand up for myself and my daughter and just say, please don't treat us in that way. And the videos that you were doing of course I'm a narcissistic mother and this is why I do this. And every single one was just could have been my mother. And it just got me thinking of all the ways that she'd treated me throughout my life. And so since then I've had this, it feels like an iceberg is dropping into the ocean. Lots of things about my childhood and now not feeling true, not feeling real. It's a very strange kind of feeling. Because it's almost like my sense of identity has changed so much because I was always told by my mother that she was a great mum. And since I've had my daughter, I've started to really question that because she wasn't and she isn't, and she wasn't a very good grandmother either. And it just feels so sad that I've got to my late 50s and feeling this real shift in emotion about what I thought I had and kind of what's left. And it's a real sense of bereavement. It's what makes me feel really sad, really empty. Also makes me feel really angry that I didn't start to, pick up on this a bit sooner.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a very strange state of mind that I have at the moment, it feels.
It sounds really disconcerting that everything that you thought you knew is suddenly not true anymore. And this experience of her discarding you, I think that's quite unique to people, and people who I'd heard talk about the same experience feel quite lonely in that, because often it's the child that chooses to go no contact. And in this situation and theirs, it's the other way around. And that feels very unfamiliar for a lot of people and quite isolating as a result, because it's not the typical way around. But I really hear that kind of, the idea of, I always liken it, this is a bit of a random cultural reference, but did you ever watch The Pirates of the Caribbean? And there's one of the episodes, one of the movies, there's a thing where the boat flips upside down and suddenly everything underwater is actually the reality, and it literally is flipped.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. It's kind of everything you thought you knew, you no longer know. And then who are you left in that? Is that right?
Yeah, it's like a real kind of questioning sort of feeling, and I'm having these strange kind of flashbacks to real strong emotions in childhood. Most of them quite uncomfortable, like being lonely, being left on my own. That sort of, I was often given silent treatment. Quite often I would go to my room because I could tell that my mum was winding herself up to be irritated about something. and I took myself out of the way in case that was something that I'd done wrong. Usually she projected whatever anger she was feeling about herself onto somebody else. So it was quite a difficult household to be in many ways. And yeah, very, very lonely as a child. I'm an only child, and my dad is my stepdad, and he married my mum when I was about 6. So my mum's never told me anything about my birth father or how I came into the world. And it's always been too awkward really to ask her about it. I've always wanted to ask her about it, but she's never sort of sat me down and told me anything. You know, she didn't really tell my aunts and uncles very much about that part of her life either. I think she just suddenly found she was pregnant, like 7 months pregnant, and didn't know. Well, one of my aunties said that it was like a one night fling or something, and she went to try to find the father, and he's given her a false name or something. But my mum's never told me anything about that directly, and I don't know if my auntie was just being a bit mean.
When you say mean, how is it being mean? Because
not mean to me, mean about my mum, because my mum's one of these people that she doesn't really like many people, and she will be in our family situations, when like Christmas and family gatherings, we've only got quite a small family. So and I was like the youngest child, and some cousins as well who were older than me. And my mum would always kind of keep me sort of separate. I would always be like the little doll who was dressed up in the nice clothes, and I didn't really get a chance to speak very much. It was all more about, you know, my mum doing the talking and my auntie doing the talking, and you know, and occasionally I'd be asked something just to amuse everybody. And, you know, you know, and it's very different to the way that I treat my own daughter. Yeah, so it's almost like I was some kind of a possession that would just be, you know, dressed up and brought out like a doll kind of thing.
Yeah, I hear, and the phrase in my brain is performing monkey.
Yes.
Does that feel, and I don't mean to call you a monkey, but I mean like that kind of like you're there for their entertainment rather than any kind of connection or knowing, right?
Yeah, and I think that sort of idea of being there for my mum's entertainment started to really grate on me a few years ago when they would come along, and you know, we'd cook a big roast dinner for them and entertain them for the day, and then you know we were quite tired because we'd been working all week. After a while, it became a bit of a drain having them here for the whole day and entertaining them. And on many occasions, I couldn't wait for them to go, you know, so I could actually just sit down and rest. And I'm sure my mum picked up on that, because that was one of her, the end phone call that we had. She did reference that kind of feeling, like, you know, she wasn't made enough of a fuss of, and she wasn't, you know, she wasn't being put first, and she expected to be first. And I said, well, you know, I've got a daughter and I've got a husband. Why would you think that I would put you first when I've got those other people in my life that are also, you know, that are very important to me? Yes. And then I started to reflect on how she'd behaved in the family gathering, and it was all about her all the time. And all about her, you know, being the centre of everything. And then I started to think back about lots of other interactions, and we never really had any people come into the house, for example. I would be allowed a friend over, and that was always really welcome. So that kind of get out of the way and be with the friend. But my parents didn't really have any friends over, and they didn't have any friends with children. So it was quite a lonely a lonely life as a child. And I wasn't encouraged to go outside and play because, I might, get damaged in some way and, or she wouldn't be able to see me, or she wouldn't know where I was, or those kinds of things. And she'd get very anxious.
That's really interesting that you called it, you call it lonely. And I absolutely hear that and validate it, because it would have been intentionally lonely, but there's such an oppression in it as well.
Yeah.
It's not just lonely. It's like you are being cut off. It seems like there's a fence around you, that you're different, special, but also at the same time completely ignored. So you are not being known, but there's an ownership of you in it. Does that
Control.
right?
It's very controlling as well.
Yeah.
That sort of sense of control. And as a child, I hadn't realised that. But then as an adult, it started to dawn on me a bit more as to how controlled I was, and, and how sad that was, really. And I think that's what I'm struggling with at the moment, those feelings of real sadness for the child that never, had many friends.
Yeah, because it is sad. What is it that you struggle with about that sadness?
I think it's just, I don't know, it's almost like being put back in the box. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like once she played with the doll, put back in the box and not needed until she wanted to open the lid again and play with me again. And, it's sort of like, maybe that doll didn't want to play those games that day.
Right.
That kind of feeling.
And is that how you're feeling now with the kind of her discarding you? Is that you feel like you've been put in the box until she wants to play with you again?
Well, just thrown away, I think.
Okay, so now it's not the box, it's the bin.
Yeah. And she actually brought round the sort of like my first shoes and a dress that I wore as a baby, and just handed them to me randomly one day, and as if she was done with me.
What, post going, like, discarding you, or before?
Before, so a couple of years ago, she just sort of handed me all my baby things, and as if she didn't need them anymore. I don't know if she was expecting some kind of a reaction. But I wouldn't dream of getting rid of my daughter's first shoes or hardly any of her things, to be honest, because they're really precious and they remind me of her.
Right. Just give me a bit more context to that, in that she gave them to you, and it felt like she was rejecting you altogether, like in your childhood. I'm just intrigued by it, simply because if you were to zoom out and not look at this, or rather, if you were close up, actually, not zoom out, if you were to look at this in isolation, that a parent giving their adult child, the things that they had as a baby might not seem quite so obscure. But for you, it felt like a rejection of you in terms of, in the bigger context of the bigger picture, or in the context of the bigger picture. So can you just talk me through that a little bit, of what it hooked into in terms of that rejection?
I think it just made me feel like she was done with me, and she no longer wanted any reminders of what I was like as a baby.
What was the precursor to her giving them to you?
Well, it's hard to say. She's often been someone who just clears out loads of things, and she would always give me all of her old clothes, and then I think that was really nice of her to give me the nice clothes that she'd not worn. But then she'd make comments like, "Oh, they're all too big for me now that I've lost weight," as though there I am.
Actually, they were passive aggressive things about your weight.
Yeah, and then things like, she'd bring a bag of clothes, and I remember like looking down her nose at me when I was looking through the clothes, because it just seemed like, you're just looking at all my rubbish kind of thing, that kind of disdain.
There's something contemptuous. There's something very patronising about it, in forcing, or not forcing it on you, but it's that sort of weird passive aggressive, negging type behavior where on the face of it, it looks like a generous thing. But when you look beyond that and see the disdain, the contempt, there's a superiority. That's what I think it is. I'm going to give you all my old clothes.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to judge you for being grateful for them, like you're a charity case. And I'm going to make you feel bad. And there's nothing wrong with needing charity, first of all. So if you were in that position, it would be a mother's pleasure, one would hope, to help their child out. But then to treat it in that way, to just make it seem an opportunity to establish dominance. And I wonder then how grateful she expected you to be for those things.
Well, I think she expected me to be very grateful.
Right.
And I think that probably fed into her feelings of, I don't know, superiority or just being important, those kinds of feelings, perhaps, because she bestowed those things on me.
And I can't help but notice there's a kind of, I don't know if the right word is allegory, but a thematic aspect of dressing you up still.
Yeah.
Like controlling your image still. Like, here are my clothes.
Because often, like when I was a child, when I became a teenager, I wanted to wear punk clothes and, studs and belts and all those kind of things. And she didn't want me to wear those things. And that was not her style at all. So when we went shopping, she wouldn't buy me some of the things that I really wanted, like, a parka coat or monkey boots or a leather jacket and these kind of things, because she didn't like them. And little by little, I think I broke free of that control and got a leather jacket off my friend and, got different boots with the money that I'd saved up from pocket money from other relatives and things. So, and probably that really did irritate her quite a lot, because then I wasn't conforming to the image that she wanted me to fulfill.
Right, because she was so desperately trying to control your image and not allow your autonomy. And isn't it interesting that when you started establishing boundaries and sort of demanding your autonomy, as you're entitled to do so, her reaction is to reject you.
Yeah. And I think that kind of built up over the years, really. And, I'm in my late 50s now. And my daughter is late sort of teenager. And I definitely noticed a difference when I had my daughter, because she would never sort of like offer to look after her, or, there was never that kind of maternal kind of, what I expected a grandma to be doing. No sort of like, oh, well, we'll take her to this place or we'll take her to that place. Yeah, in fact, when I told my mum that I was pregnant, she had a very strange response. Like my mother-in-law broke into tears and was really excited and really pleased and stuff. But my mum said, "Oh, I didn't think you were having any children. I've told everybody that you're not having children."
Oh my God.
And I think from that moment, things started to dawn on me a little bit differently about my relationship with my mum. Because but she was very interested in the whole pregnancy, and I spoke to her every day of my pregnancy. But then I don't think. I just wonder if she really knew how to be a mother and had that maternal instinct.
I mean, let me ask you how you knew to be a mother.
I guess I instinctively tried my best to love and bond with my child, and it is kind of difficult, and it can be really hard. But I knew to cuddle her and to hold her and to comfort her and to feed her and wash her and dress her and all those things.
I'm going to ask you a really random question. And I wonder if you've ever experienced this, where how old is your daughter now, roughly? You said late teens, didn't you?
17, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And she's your only child?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you ever now might be walking along or even lying in bed and you might hear what sounds like a baby crying. What happens to you?
I think it's a really, as long as it's a nice cry,
Yeah.
so, not a distressed cry. It takes me back to when she was baby and all those lovely sort of cuddly moments, and just those nice quiet moments where we were looking into each other's eyes, and
Right.
like I sort of felt that love, those kinds of
So it makes
feelings.
you respond.
Yeah.
So a baby's cry, because I don't know about you, and I wonder if when I say this, you'll be like, oh yeah, no, that as well. When I hear a baby now, and my youngest is 9, but when I hear a baby crying, and I often do because there's my house, there's a thoroughfare to a school, and so often you'll hear kids in the buggy and like whinging either about going to school, or maybe they're just the baby of the family and they're being pushed along in a buggy and they're unhappy about having been pulled out of bed or some reason. My immediate, like, instinctive thing is the baby. And then I recognize that it's not, and it's like, no, I have this, but there's an immediate kind of knee-jerk response of, is that child okay?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. If I hear the children in the street, sort of crying, sometimes it makes me feel quite anxious, because I think it's, what kind of a cry is that? As I said before,
okay?
as long as I know the child's okay, then if I can see that the child's okay, it does take me to some nice memories of my own daughter. But if they seem like they're upset, then it really stresses me.
Right. So notice that, right? That any child crying can provoke an emotional response from you, or a kind of instinct to react to that child's needs.
Mm.
And that you didn't learn that. You certainly weren't taught it. There's a natural instinct in you. And the reason I'm highlighting this, and it's just because when you say something along the lines of, perhaps you didn't know how to be a mother, and maybe you're right, but the danger with that sort of statement is it's almost like we give them permission to have been so awful.
Mm.
And that's why I'm highlighting it, because what I want to be really careful of for you is the idea that it's not her fault.
Oh no, I think it is her fault.
Okay, good.
I think she's often had choices and just made the wrong choices because she's too self-centered and just too interested in her own needs, and can't really see anybody else's need
Right.
in any way.
So we're talking about grief and bereavement and kind of the anger. And I just want to go back to what you said at the beginning, because it just seems like there's so many different layers to the kind of places where anger and hurt and bereavement might be. And the first one being your birth father, in that there seems to be this total denial of your need in her desire to protect whatever that secret is about who he is.
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
And she because my dad sort of adopted me as step-parent adoption, and I've got the adoption paperwork, and she didn't even tell the social worker anything about the birth father either.
Really? Like,
yeah. Yeah. So it's just very, very brief notes. I would guess the social worker didn't even get a chance to ask any questions. She would have just said, we're not putting any information in about that. I don't even know if she told my dad about it. She's certainly not told her sister and about it. She's got no idea as to what was going on at that time of Mom's life.
So you've been denied half your identity.
Yeah.
Because of her self-centeredness, her need to protect whatever shame there is around him. And because you said she didn't find out she was pregnant until she was 7 months gone.
According to one of my aunties, yeah.
How do you believe that or not believe that?
I don't really know what to believe, to be honest.
Fair enough.
I think my auntie was probably accurate in what she'd noticed at that time. So it must have become apparent that my mum was pregnant, and I'm sure my auntie would have been accurate in her memory as to how that kind of landed.
Okay. And so, how old roughly would your mum have been? Again, you don't need to be specific if it's too identifying. But
early 20s. So
20s.
Old enough to know better and to sleep with people and not use any contraception.
I mean, yeah, but accidents happen. So I think, and I suppose if you're late 50s, we're talking 60s?
Yeah,
Right.
Being in 60s.
So there would have been a lot of judgment around a single mother, unwed single mother,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of shame for her from society, but also internalized, shame.
Yes.
So there's a sort of understanding in that. But as you've got older, to deny you that knowledge, and she wouldn't ever discuss it with you as an adult, or...
No, I always wanted to ask her, but then never felt like I could. It was a strange sort of feeling. I often worked out in my mind what I would say and how I would say it, but then just chickened out at the end because it just, I don't know, it just felt too awkward, and I felt too awkward.
So
Actually, my mum was divorced when she was in her early 20s, I think, or late teens. So she was always Mrs. So that might have taken some of the shame away from...
Wait, hang on a minute.
A baby. Yeah.
But she was married, then divorced, then got pregnant with you.
Yeah. Because I always thought that her first husband was my father and that he'd left her, and, So I even went so far as to use the family tracing service from the Salvation Army to try to find her first husband. And obviously he had no knowledge of her being pregnant because it was nothing to do with him. And that was all very, very strange, because I thought that was what had happened. Because when you're a child, you sort of make things up in your mind to make sense, don't you?
Of course you do, because there's just such a huge confusion around it. And there's such like I said, a denial of who you are, even because, regardless of whether a child is in touch with their father or not, there is a kind of, I would argue, a right to know who that person is for their own sense of identity, not because of they can go off and contact them, and I can understand that if they're a person who is maybe in jail or kind of a difficult, dangerous person, that there would be a natural inclination to kind of protect a child from that. But I would also argue that even so, a child has that right to know that because it's their identity. Did you ever do DNA testing or anything?
Well, I did actually, and I ended up finding out that there was no being an only child and not having a big family. There was no definite matches of any sort of fathers. I was just told that what kind of heritage I have, and so it could I could my birth father could be anyone anywhere in the world. So it didn't really. I mean, it was some. I got the genealogy of my mum's side of the family, but there was nothing really that
nobody on his side.
No, because there's no name, there's no sort of
does
age,
that matter?
that date of birth. I think so. Yeah, but for the tracing heritage thing that I did,
I did. I think they've gone bust now just recently, but years ago did 23andMe, and I get notifications all the time about this cousin who is like your 12th cousin twice removed or something, and they're like, you've got connections through your paternal side. And my father died when I was 19, so he is not in the gene mix. You know, his DNA is not added to that. So I'm surprised that on yours there was no paternal.
I think it's because there's no name and there's no date of birth, and therefore they can't trace any person. But they can say generally that you've got relatives who've got similar DNA. You know, I've got lots in America, I've got lots in Ireland, I've got lots in Scotland. So, you know, it could be anyone really.
Which feels even more confusing for you.
Yeah, because I just don't feel like a whole person sometimes.
Yeah, I understand that, because
I
you
feel
don't
like I've just been transported into the world and not really told anything. And this sort of a feeling of slight kind of bewilderment about how I got here and what my story is. And now, you know, a lot of what I thought was my identity and my story doesn't really feel real.
So yeah, because you've had this version of your mother who keeps telling you that she's an amazing mother over and over and over and over again, and then you know, she discards you, and you haven't got a reality of who your father is either.
No.
And so there's no kind of anchoring. And anchoring is very important to our sense of self. And it's something that family courts address very significantly, that even if a child is not to have contact with one or other parent, that they are to be informed of them. And it's things like to retain their surname if they were given them at birth, because it's half of their heritage. They look very... They don't frown on it in a like judgmental way, but more in a like, is it for the child's benefit to change the surname to whatever? If, say, for example, the mother wants to change it to their maiden name, is it for the child's benefit or is it the mother's benefit? So they're acting in the child's benefit all the time. And one of the things they're quite strict about is that the child should have that information about themselves, because it's their identity. So, you know, you mentioned identity in your email about how, you know, not having had one, and then your mother's kind of, well, now having learnt that your mother is not who she told you she was, there's huge loss of identity.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you just want to explain what that's like a little bit.
Yeah. So, and you know, and I guess I'm getting older every day. And, looking back on my life, and you know, I've recently separated from my husband after quite a long marriage. And so then it just has shifted everything that I thought was concrete and about me into chaos, really. And it you know, I don't know. I suppose that phrase, I don't know who I am anymore, is a little sounds a little dramatic, but that's sort of how it feels.
It does not sound dramatic. It sounds like you're completely untethered and you don't know what's what anymore. So how is that impacting you in your kind of day-to-day life?
Well, I'm kind of getting through it, but you know, I am having flashbacks that are of similar kind of nature. So I think my mind is showing me certain things that I need to work on. So that's helpful. It did feel very overwhelming at first, but now that I'm understanding it in that context, I think it's possible to, you know, to work through those feelings a bit more easily. Yeah. So, you know, and I've always been brought up to be a people pleaser, you know, and I've always been very empathic to other people's feelings. And I understand now that that's to do with childhood trauma, because you become quite hypervigilant. Somebody's like shifting mood, or, you know, little mannerisms and things that make you realise that there's going to be some bad temper on the horizon.
Yeah.
You know, my mum never hit me, but it was more, you know, if she was in a bad mood, the whole house was in a bad mood, that kind of thing. And so it was just best to get away. Or sometimes I would sort of join in with the nastiness about my aunties, because
Yeah,
that
of
looked
course.
like, kind of another way of surviving it and not being picked on.
And this is just it. You were surviving. This is not
Yeah.
who you are as a character. This is you in a survival situation. And you said, oh, she didn't hit me or anything. Like, it's not that bad. But actually, children will perceive emotional threat as the same level of danger as physical threat, because both threaten their literal physical safety. Because if our parent abandons us, then we are in our kind of caveman times. If our parent or community were to abandon us, then we'll be basically unable to survive without them. And so the child perceives that emotional threat exactly the same way as a physical threat. It does exactly the same. It presents rather the exact same danger. And so, this is really important that you absolutely understand that because she didn't hit you, just because, and I inverted commas that, she didn't hit you, it does not minimize the danger you would have felt and the reason that you had to learn all those survival coping mechanisms. And that's another part of this, is that while everyone else in a healthy family is building an identity, you were having to survive. You were building survival mechanisms.
Yeah.
And so, it's grossly unfair. There's such an injustice in that.
And I think I often had this feeling that if I just disappeared, things would be easier.
Right.
And that's really sad, isn't it?
Really?
Disappear.
To disappear? What, as a small child you used to think that?
Yeah, I just think if I wasn't here.
And what would have happened if you went now?
Well, I guess my mum might have been happier.
So
But
you
I
would
always
have
felt
made
like a
her
bit of a
happier?
burden. I felt like I was in the way, a bit of a burden, causing people to be unhappy, those kind of things.
What's it like to think about that now?
How can a child be in the way?
Who can a child be in the way? The child you chose to have. That you weren't
You
maybe
should cherish the
expecting?
child. You should look after them and, nurture them and cherish them.
If you found out tomorrow that you were 7 months pregnant, what would you do? What would your reaction be?
Well, I'm so full to that I think hopefully I would think about how I would manage and, plan and look forward to the baby, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you weren't prepared to look after the baby and give it all the love and care and attention a baby needs, if not just prepared, but able.
Yeah. Well, it would be kind of to the baby to let somebody who could give those things to it help out the
Right.
baby. In fact, that speaks to one of my aunties. She had some children, but she always wanted a girl, and that auntie of mine is she's quite elderly now, but she always tells the story of how she wanted to steal me. And I think she probably thought that would solve the problem. She brought me up and looked after me. So I often think that might have been really nice if I'd had her as the mum instead.
And isn't that horrendously painful, because you can see that you would have been loved there in a way that you need, instead of how you were.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued by that, because the other sort of implication with that is that she maybe spotted that things were not okay.
Yeah. She's the one that said about, me being, my mum not knowing the name of the father and things, and one night stand kind of thing, which, and I do believe that probably is correct information.
But, well, the danger with that is that there's clearly, well, not clearly, but possibly resentment from your aunt.
Yeah.
And it sounds like nobody knew really what happened.
No, I guess not. And whenever I told that story to my mum about my auntie wanting to steal me, my mum got quite annoyed and said, "But you were mine," and she wasn't going to have you. You know?
Even in that, right? It's like you're a toy to be
Yes, exactly.
possessed.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
noticed that too with the father and denying you the knowledge that it's that you are hers and she gets to decide what's important or not
Yeah.
important for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
clothes and everything. There's a constant. So that in turn will also inhibit any kind of identity building because you're being told what decisions and what's right for you constantly. Like, I know you best type thing. I know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And is that something you did hear growing up a lot?
Yeah, definitely. And I rebelled against that a lot when I was a teenager. So we used to have quite a lot of arguments because I'd learned that the world wasn't always, and my mum's decisions weren't always the best decisions, and they weren't always the ones that I wanted to do. So I think that round about my teenage years, when I started to notice some of these things about the control, that was when I think she started to dislike me a bit.
If you're scared of rejection, of saying no, have no idea how to trust people, you're not alone, and you don't have to heal alone either. That's what the Hub is for. It's a membership community designed for survivors just like you. Every month, we dive into powerful courses, we hold live calls, and connect in a supportive, understanding space so you can break free from the past and build healthy, fulfilling relationships. Maybe it's time to stop surviving and instead start thriving. Visit jointhehub.ac today using the code POD20 to get £20 off your first month's membership. I can't wait to see you there. Take care. Bye.
Okay. I'm going to come back to the very first question I asked you. And that is, what is it in this session that you need to leave here with today?
Well, I think it's good to actually put those feelings into words and to have the validation of somebody hearing my story. Because I've gone over and over my own story in my mind many times and can't always make sense of it really, because it seems like it's all a bit dreamlike at the moment because of how I'm remembering things and how it's affecting me. So it is like a sense of bereavement for what I thought was my life and what I thought was my identity. Mm-hmm. And definitely anger because, how could I have been treated that way?
Okay. I'm going to notice to you that you haven't actually answered the question. And I'm wondering if it's hard to know what you need.
Yeah, I think it is hard to know what I need because I guess for many years I was told what I needed.
Right.
And then for many years I've kind of done the opposite of what I was told.
Right.
And now I kind of don't know what the middle ground is really. If I was just rebelling against it or if I was, I guess it sort of put a lot of my feelings about myself and my identity into this state of flux now because I don't quite know who I am anymore.
Okay. Well then, let's try and narrow it down because the danger is I could sit here and say, well, it seems like you need X, Y, Z and you need this. And I do not want to be them. I don't want to repeat your pattern of telling you what is kind of the thing that you need or what would be good for you or anything else like that. So, when it comes to building identity or kind of learning who we are, essentially one of the biggest things we can face in that is decision making. And that's what this is, right? The decision making. I don't know whether to go left or right. I don't know whether to do X or Z, Y or Z. And I need other people to either sort of approve my decisions or, help me make them or just tell me what to do. And does that something that you relate to?
Yeah. Yeah, because
Okay.
I mean, I'm great at making decisions, but at the moment, I just feel like I can't make decisions like I used to be able to, and I
When
don't
you
know
say
where
you're
that's from.
great,
So at work, for instance, I can make decisions, and
okay.
and but at home, I don't know. I just always feel like I need to defer to somebody else, but now there's nobody else to defer to, so
You're right.
it's just me.
So then let's look at what the difference between work and home is in terms of decision making.
Well, I guess at work there's a structure, isn't there, in place, and it's very regimented, and you kind of know what decisions you can make, what decisions you can't make, and
Yeah.
and there's a hierarchy, and there's there's policies, and there's things you can do and things you can't do, and it's got a real structure.
Yeah, there's very clear parameters,
Yeah,
right?
but there isn't
And
at home at the moment.
at home, you can do whatever you want. And then when we can do whatever we want and we don't know what we want, it means we kind of stay in this state of flux of, I don't know which way to go. And then we end up being still because we're scared maybe of making the wrong decision. So that actually leads me to ask, how do you feel about making decisions? At home, not at work, at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd feel quite irritated at having to make decisions. So, for a long time, somebody else has been there to, or even somebody's been there to make a decision and me to disagree with it, that kind of thing. So now
Right.
that it's just me, I think it just feels really different. And I
You said you
suppose,
feel irritated?
yeah, and really, I think my confidence has all been shaken because of the fact
What?
that I've started to notice all these things that I thought were very concrete and very fixed in my life, and now they feel like they're disintegrating.
Right. So, did you answer my question?
Probably not.
I'm just saying, I don't seriously answer. How do you feel about making decisions at home? Irritated, you said. You said you felt irritated.
Yeah, and yeah, irritated, definitely.
Okay, tell me
And
what's irritating about it.
I mean, the fact that I have to, the fact that it's all on me, it's like all that responsibility, I think is kind of, yeah, because my mum trained me to check everything out with her, and she'd sort of tell me what my opinion was. And again, I would sort of argue sometimes and say that wasn't quite right, but, at least I'd sort of have someone to talk it through with. But now that she's decided she doesn't want any contact with me, I haven't got that anymore. Not that I'm longing to have contact with it, because I'm not. I'm quite glad not to have contact with it. But I think that sort of idea of just having someone that you could phone and chat to is quite sad.
Well, also not having the person to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Even if it's something you disagree with, because at least then you know which way you want to go.
Yeah.
Even if it's right. So there's no checks and balances for you anymore if you're making a decision on your own. Right? Okay. So if we were to think about when you are then presented with a decision now and there's no one to kind of get an opinion from or a sounding board or to tell you what to do, and you said you felt irritated, and I'm intrigued by what the irritation is, what happened in that moment, that flash of what is the...
It's been on my own. I feel angry that I've been discarded and put in the bin. I think it
So
does.
every time you make a decision, it's almost triggering?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the feeling. The feeling is, and I can almost hear my mum saying, "Oh, well, you're on your own now. You make your decisions." And I
Like
know that I'm well capable
punishment.
of making them. Yeah. And that sort of silence and that disdain and that, well, if you make a mess of it, then it's all on you kind of thing.
So if you... so what happens if you make the wrong decision?
Well, if I make the wrong decision, then I'll just sort it out. But
How would you feel?
Well, I don't feel bad about making wrong decisions because we all do, don't we? But I think at the back of my mind, my mum's voice would be, "Oh, look at her, she's done it wrong again." If only she'd listened. If only.
That does sound like you feel bad.
Yeah, but I think it's coming from that place that I don't think it's coming from me, myself. I don't feel like I feel bad about myself making bad decisions. I just feel like I end up with that nagging voice, like,
Right.
oh, well, she's done it wrong again kind of thing. It's, she just can't do it. All these negative things. And they are always in my mother's voice.
Okay. How does that voice protect you?
Well, I guess I can get annoyed with that voice, can't I? And not with myself.
Okay. I want to check this out with you because something's not feeling right. And I don't know if it's my projection, which it may well be, but the fact that there's a judgmental voice in your head, the way you said to me, and I want to really own that this could be me and projecting and everything else, and I'm totally on board with owning that, if that's what's happening. But the way you said to me, I'm okay with making the wrong decision because we all make wrong decisions, don't we? And it was a very intellectualized kind of response rather than a emotional one. Does that resonate with you at all as a thing that you do, as in go to the intellectual space rather than and to avoid the emotional space?
Yeah, I guess I don't feel guilty for making bad decisions. It's a case of I think I do deal with those sorts of things objectively. I mean, obviously, I'll feel sad that I've made a wrong decision, especially if I've hurt somebody's feelings, or But I know that I wouldn't have done it out of meanness. I would have done it, just from getting things wrong, not kind of going out of my way to upset people.
What is difficult then for you about making decisions?
Maybe it's because they interrupt my, I don't know, just because it's quite nice to have a nice, quiet, settled life, isn't it? And when suddenly something goes wrong, it's annoying. Maybe it's that kind of feeling. Or to make big decisions about the future. Sometimes that can feel quite scary because it often relies on other people. Mm-hmm. And you can't really control other people, can you?
No, I'm going to change tack a little bit and just ask you how you feel, how you do connect to emotion.
I think I've always struggled with connecting to emotions and naming emotions and feeling emotions, and I think often I block them out, and often I get lots of aches and pains in different parts of my body instead of having thoughts about things.
How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling right now?
I'm a little bit panicky.
Okay, what's happening? Go on. What's happening?
So I can feel my heart racing a bit, and I'm shifting around in my chair, and I can notice that my hands and feet feel quite cold. So I think.
Okay, what's the threat? What are you scared of?
I'm scared of.
And if it's me, that's absolutely fine.
I think I'm just feeling like a little girl again, and it's like maybe it's that inner child sort of thing that doesn't really feel safe to be a grown up.
Okay, what's she scared of?
Yes, the worry that the world is as horrible as her mum after it was, and it is. The world's a tricky place at times. It's not always kind to people, is it?
Is that your? This is going to sound awful, and I can feel. I feel uncomfortable even saying it, but is that what you really think, or is that what you think you should say?
I think I'm finding it difficult to connect with the emotion. So that's probably why I've got these physical sort of.
There's
feelings.
Something happening here in this space now.
Yeah, maybe it's a trauma. Maybe it's a trauma response where I'm starting to disappear because it's too difficult.
Invisible, you're not sure you've got the answer. Do you know that I don't know is a good enough answer?
Yeah.
That you're allowed to say to me, I don't know, Helen, I don't know. Okay. Helen. That you're allowed that.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
I think it was interesting that I might have gone off into a bit of a trauma kind of reaction there, because that was sort of pressing me about you know, about grown up things, isn't it? About making decisions and yeah.
Because it felt quite heavily defended when I was asking about it, which is why I kind of went, yeah, I could be projecting, and I still could be. But it feels where I'm sitting like there's a disconnect, that I'm being given and this sounds awful again, I don't like this language, and it's not in any way intended to shame, it's intended to help. But it sort of feels performative. Do you know what I mean by that? That when somebody, so when we've grown up in trauma, because we got punished for not having an answer or not having the solution or not whatever it might be, sometimes we'll just say something to kind of almost deflect it so that we don't have to continue down whatever path, or just to stop the attack of, well, why don't you know? How could you not know? That kind of thing, that. And I wonder is that happening for you, that you feel like you're having
Maybe it goes back to confidence, really. And if you've got confidence, then you have to have a sense of identity, don't you? But my sense of identity is all over the place, because I've had so many different messages about who I am, that it's a really hard thing for me to think about.
Because your kind of description of your experience is very clear. Like, you've got a lot of language, a lot of understanding, like the intellectual understanding, but it does feel like there's an emotional disconnect, that maybe the emotions are really threatening me or something. That how were they responded to you when you were little, if you were emotional?
I was shouted at if I was crying, and told to be quiet because my crying was upsetting her. And I would be left to cry for hours on my own, with nobody coming up to check on me.
And I can't. That's beyond disgustingly awful.
Mm. So
then, what does it feel like to show somebody any emotion now?
It's not comfortable, and there's that fear of rejection, isn't there? So, it's quite significant, because if you're rejected by your own mother, then anyone can reject you then, can't they?
Logically, but not realistically.
Yeah. That's sort of how it sort of goes in my mind, So if your own mother can't love you, then why would anybody else?
Yeah. And I hear that and get that. There is the child internalizes the idea that their parent being unable to love them, meet their needs, attune to them, being angry with them, all of those things, is because the child is not good enough, because they can't understand that their parent maybe isn't as emotionally available or intelligent, or just is not a good parent. They can't cope with that concept, so they have to blame themselves again to that safety and protection and survival. I just want to go back to, so if you were to show me the emotion that you're really feeling, there's a chance I might reject you for that?
Yeah, or that I would look really mean and bad and not a nice person, I suppose.
Mean and bad because
I think that's how I've always been led to think I am.
But why? What would showing me your emotion? Why would showing your emotion to me make you mean and bad? What about it would make you mean and bad?
I was just thinking of how my mum used to make me feel whenever I showed emotion as a child. It would always seem to be the wrong emotion that I was showing, whether I was too loud, I was too talkative, talked about the wrong things. So often I would just be really quiet. It's almost like feeling punished for having emotions, I suppose. That's sort of how it feels.
So they became really threatening?
Yeah.
And so as you sit here with me now, just out of interest, how old do you feel right now?
probably about 14 or so.
Okay. Not surprising. And that's actually a really emotional age where our emotions are very close to the surface because our hormones are going crazy and everything's changing. And, life as we've understood it as children is different. And so you're feeling 14 right now. What was happening for you at 14 when you were 14?
Well, I think I'd just discovered boys and rock music and started to distance away a little bit from being the sweet little girl that my mum always made me into.
And so what would that
And
mean to your safety?
well, she was always very critical of appearance. And so the clothes choices that I was making at that age, with leather jackets and, lace up boots and things, I would get ridiculed for, or look down on, or look at her, she's who does she think she is, that kind of thing, and my growing sense of identity with people who are punks and had their hair in different colours and things was always looked down on, and oh, you don't want to be like them, that sort of thing.
But you did.
So
You did want to.
and then that just has made me think about the bags of clothes and how they were a certain kind of look of clothes. And there was a point where I think my mum was copying my style, but then
Right.
she also brought her own take on that as well. So some of the clothes that she gave me were not necessarily ones that I would have picked.
Well, no, because she's your mother, and how much older is she than you?
Well, she used to always dress a lot younger, so
Well, regardless, she's still your mother and she's still older than you, and you're still not going to want to wear the same
No.
clothes. Even if she had your exact style, you're still not necessarily going to want to, unless you're being given freedom of choice. So it's one thing for a teenage girl to go into their mum's wardrobe and be like, oh, I really like that T-shirt, I'm going to nick it. And then it's found in the bottom of a pile under the bed or whatever. And the mother goes like, oh my God, stop stealing my stuff. That's one thing compared to a child trying to discover their identity and their mother trying to hijack that and make it their identity. So you're never separate from me. Doesn't matter what you wear, you're never separating from me.
Yeah, that is quite big, actually.
Right?
Yeah.
That you can try and be autonomous all you like, but I will not allow it.
And
So
that
go on.
whole kind of being in a enmeshed relationship.
Very much so.
I think that's, and some of your videos have kind of spoken about that. So it's sort of that kind of, not being able to be autonomous, I suppose, is the thing.
You're just being deprived an identity the whole way along.
Yeah.
Right? And so then I wonder about sitting here with me in a space with somebody who is trained to hear things that are not being said and who has an understanding of things that not many people do, maybe, and, unless they're in that system themselves. And even then, maybe they only understand their experience, whereas mine kind of, because of what I do, means I've witnessed lots of different versions of these experiences. And I wonder then if 14-year-old you is actually feeling a bit threatened or hopeful, maybe, that she's going to be given an identity. One of the two, or maybe both, perhaps.
I think hopeful, definitely. Yeah.
And yet there's some panic feeling. And I actually want to check in. How is that feeling right now?
Oh, it's subsided.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did it subside? What made it go?
I think just being able to get out a bit more of how it was for me as a child. I think I just needed to talk about that really and have it heard.
So being able to tell your story,
Yeah.
being able to speak your truth, not have it stolen from you and twisted and used against you. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think
recognize.
that's probably the summary of what I needed to get from this session. To
There you go.
you know, to kind of be heard.
So your need from this time together was have a witness,
Well,
to be
yeah,
visible.
and maybe help other people who've had similar things, because I found it really helpful to listen to other people's stories. Because not all stories are the same, but they do have similar themes sometimes. So yeah. So
Well,
it's been helpful to think of things in a different way, you know, alongside somebody
yeah,
rather than just in my own mind.
okay. And then there's a small danger with that motivation a little bit. And the only reason being that if we are in the space thinking about how we can help other people, we are possibly going to filter so that it's digestible for everybody. Does this make sense? Does it?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking purely of the fact that the knock-on effect would be that other people might resonate, you know, some of the things I said might resonate with other people, just like other people's
Yeah.
stories have resonated with me. I was just thinking of that, you know, that kind of cascading effect. And
absolutely it
effects.
will. And it will, but especially only children, especially enmeshed children, they're going to really relate to what we're talking about. But I wonder if that then inhibits you experiencing your own truth in a really raw way, in an emotional way, because that's, do you see, does that
it stops me from feeling so alone and isolated, I think, knowing that other people
okay?
have got similar feelings.
Can you see though how, let me try and get this wording right, because there is such truth in what you said. There is a community in it. There's a connection. There's a support that you're giving other people, a validation that you're giving other people. But if that is part of your thought process in this space, what that might do is inhibit your connection to yourself, because you're thinking outside rather than inside. A little bit.
Okay.
Not necessarily your whole focus is everybody else and how they're hearing and
Yeah.
process, but just that there's because you know, I've said to you about the kind of, there's feeling like there's a disconnect between the emotional and the intellectual, and there's a difficulty connecting to those emotions rather. There's a safety, right? And
Mhm.
thinking about other people in it too. Did this make?
Yeah.
Did this,
But you know, wanting to air my story was quite selfish of me in many ways, because I
quite a
wanted
selfish.
wanted to do it for me, you know, and it was about my need to be heard. But I'm just thinking of the cascade of that could be that other people feel some benefit from hearing
Sure.
what's happened to me.
But okay, so that language, this is why I'm challenging you on this. And it's not because I'm trying to be like, this is bad. I'm saying, I'm trying to show you how you wanted to come on the podcast. You emailed in, you wrote me why you wanted to come on the podcast and what you wanted to kind of look at with the anger and the bereavement, letting things go, and the grief of your experience. And I therefore invited you on the basis of that email to meet your need. Above anybody else that had emailed in, I took your email. And so you called yourself selfish for taking up the space, I think, right? For being here in this spot. But you don't control who I choose to invite on. All you get to do is the email, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder, this is where I think what I'm trying to show you is that you're justifying to yourself that it's okay that you're taking up this space because other people are going to benefit from it. Instead of, I just want to take up the space and have it because it's been offered to me. And why should I not?
Yeah. And I think I do struggle with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Because like as a child, I was wanting to disappear and didn't want to take up space.
Yeah, exactly right. So then there's such grief in that, because I invited you into the space and that was my decision. And then there's is it a shame around having that, being given that?
Shame. Not sure.
Okay.
Not sure exactly. Not sure what emotion that feels like.
Shame, as in shame. You don't know what shame feels like?
Oh no, I don't know that.
Okay.
I feel shame at first.
Okay, good. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, I feel like it's definitely a privilege to be picked, definitely. But at the same time, I was keen to air my story and and really to, I suppose, make some better sense of the feelings that I'm having. But then in some ways I'm still not really that in touch with some of the feelings because of how they're all, appearing here, there and everywhere and not necessarily in a very good order, which probably is to do with the trauma, and it's probably is to do with, the feeling of that trauma, coming in different situations at the moment.
Yeah. It's almost like they're mirroring just your whole kind of perception of self, in that they're untethered, just like your identity feels untethered.
Yeah, it does feel like a box has been opened, and then all these feelings are floating around, and I, kind of experiencing them in a single way, but not necessarily connecting them. A bit like, I mean, there's the parts in therapy, isn't there, where people have different parts of them, and perhaps that is quite a significant way of understanding how I'm feeling at the moment. Things aren't able to or be put together very well. They have to be looked at separately.
And yet at the same time, they're all existing in the same space.
Yeah, it's quite busy in my head at the moment.
Yeah, so you're kind of everything's floating about, but you'd like to feel quite tidy and neat. And
I would like things to be tidy.
Totally valid.
Yeah,
totally understand that. I wonder if I just ask you again how you're feeling right now. What are you feeling?
I think I am feeling a bit relieved in some ways, because it's good to have spoken about it. And each time that I speak about it, it just seems to settle things a little bit more and sort of bring other things up. But generally, it's a forward kind of thing. I think definitely the relief is one of the main things that I'm feeling. And I don't know that I do feel quite so angry. I feel sad. I feel bereaved and the grief, definitely. But you can't sort of go back, can you? To go forward.
Oh, is that true?
Well, you can't change what's happened, can you? You can only check your own response to it, and I think I don't really need to keep on describing everything that has happened to me, just to move on, really.
Well, see, now then, I wonder whose language that is. You don't have to keep going on about it, Emma.
Yeah, you don't doing that. Yeah, that's kind of how. Yeah, and actually,
who did I wait? What happened now? Who did I sound like right then?
You reminded me exactly of my mum's last conversation with me, where I said, "Oh, I suppose I've always been a bit of a burden," and she just completely cut me off with that sentence and said, "Oh, don't be bringing all that up again."
Right. So this is the thing. There is such bravery in coming on into this space with me, knowing it's a public space that people are going to hear. And of course, we're going to anonymize you and all of the things. But let me notice to you where you might be in danger of kind of colluding with her belief system of don't keep going back, don't keep going on, don't add to other people's burdens, don't ask people to hold stuff for you, don't take up space, don't be uncomfortable or annoying or hard work in any way, shape or form. And I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the whole, like, being mindful of when you're saying it'll help other people, that to doing it for yourself is okay, that it's justifiable. And yes, there is a ripple effect. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's why I do the whole podcast, right? Because I know it will help people and you know it will help people. But there's almost if it's not for someone else's benefit, I'm really going to struggle with doing it for myself, because that will make me a burden. It will make me selfish. You use the word selfish, and being really mindful of how much you silence yourself in your own story, right? Don't keep going up, going on about it, don't bring it up, oh, you're not going to do that again. No. That is not okay on any level from anyone. There is a place at which maybe we've got stuck in our own trauma and we're not moving on from it, and there's a benefit for us to keep ruminating over it. But all that actually would tell me is that something is still unresolved and it does need to be pulled apart further. We need to understand why it's there still. And so when we say, oh, you can't go back to move forward, actually, in my work, the absolute opposite is true. You have to go back to move forward, because you have to understand why you feel emotions are threatening, decision-making is irritating, responsibility is overwhelming and annoying. And, you know, this idea I just throw in the mix that if I have to make decisions for myself, then I'm not being cared for. And that means I'm alone. And that is painful in itself, right? So there's this, and I'll come back and ask you how you feel about that in a second. But the denial of yourself in that statement of you can't keep going back to go forward is so hard. And I wonder what 14-year-old you would have thought about that in the moment.
Yeah, can we just go back to that being careful? Because that's
will
really
you just
hit a nerve. Yeah.
Just answer for me how 14-year-old you would have felt about you saying, can't go back to go forward.
I don't know. Well, I think 14-year-old me would say, why didn't you come and save me?
Okay. 14-year-old you wanted to be heard and seen and saved. Right? Let's go back then, if you want to if you're ready to, we can go back to it.
Yeah. There is a great sense of relief if somebody makes decisions for you, isn't there? And as a child, that was always dressed up as being somebody caring for me, because, you know, that relief of not having to make those decisions and take responsibility. And my mother is kind of like that in her adult life. She doesn't really like to. It's strange because I think she likes to. She doesn't like people telling her what to do, but she also likes an easy life. So so she'll avoid lots of things in order to have an easy life. And probably the biggest thing that she's avoided now is me.
But you know that's not because you're difficult.
No, I know it's not because I'm difficult. I know it's because she can't cope with actually being a whole person.
Well, with being held accountable, actually.
Yes.
being challenged, being told actually it's not okay to just stomp all over everyone in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And,
The,
you know, she definitely can't cope with that. But you know what, I can cope with people telling me that I was wrong and people telling me that I've not done something right. You know, and I will say sorry if I've done something wrong. And unlike my mum.
yeah. You know, there is, first of all, such strength in that, especially coming from this background of expectation, demand, compliance, silencing, you know, enmeshment, denial of autonomy. There's a place also of just being mindful that you're not taking blame or responsibility where it's not yours, being really careful with that one. Go on,
Yeah.
what was that head shape?
No, I was just thinking I'm not taking blame for a lot of things. I won't go into the details, but there's, you know, certain people are trying to blame me for certain things, you know, in my personal life that are not my responsibility.
Right. And good, because that's important, right? That you are holding those boundaries. Going back to that thing of responsibility and decision making, it's always fascinating to me that the kind of toxic, narcissistic parent will demand you do everything for them and give them everything and almost be responsible for them and think for them almost, and then punish you for it too.
Yeah.
And like, it's, well, you've crossed a line there by doing whatever that they don't like, but they don't give you any indication that they don't like it and that they're, do you know what I mean? There's just a mood shifting sands constantly of what is or is not acceptable. But then also, if you don't do the decision making, you also get punished, right? So you never know where you stand, and you can't trust the ground you stand on because it could move at any moment. So, you know, just absolute validity in that feeling. But then for you as an individual, you know, I really recognize when we are adults, we are faced with a ton of decisions. And then when we're parents, it's more decisions. And then when we're single parents, it's even more decisions and homeowners, and we have to decide on this and that and the other. And when you've not been given the skill, and it is a life skill, of making decisions for yourself, this becomes really, really overwhelming. And there also can be huge freedom in it. But what I really notice is what you were shown as loved was essentially the decisions being made for you. The care that you got were decisions made for you. Even when you didn't like it, this is how she showed you she cared about you, was by making those decisions or choosing things on your behalf without any kind of reference to your autonomy, right? And so it's natural that you would still want that as an evidence, you know, the relief of it. And just as a human being, I was thinking, I can't decide where we're going to eat, you decide, I can't be bothered, right? It's like, there's one too many decisions, please can you do that?
Yeah.
You know?
Just deciding what to have for dinner every night. It's just...
Oh my God.
I
can't bear it, personally.
Yeah,
I was so
night.
like, oh my God. Cereal supper, everyone. You know, or outsourcing it, getting my kids to decide what they want for dinner and then going with it, and it gives them a decision-making process and me some relief, right? So there's a dual benefit in it. But so there is a natural part of that, just being the human experience of we have to make so many decisions. It's really nice when someone else does make them for us. But what you're saying is there's a line, and that's a reasonable thing. I'm not going to, you do not get to decide what clothes I wear. You do not get to decide X, Y, Z for me. But if I ask you to make a decision for me, that is okay. And it is, right? But noticing that thing of your experience of care and love was someone controlling every aspect of your identity. And so when you are left in a space where you are having to make those choices for your identity, whether it's micro or macro, that's going to really feel very, very lonely and like you are unlocked.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's exactly it. That summarised it perfectly.
Oh, well, thanks. We'll just check it off then.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, you know, it's been really helpful to talk it through with you, and you know, I've been coming to the realization of quite a few of these things, and it you know, I probably still will leave the session and still be thinking and still be evolving, if you like, but I'm probably in the middle of that kind of evolvement, if you like, and it does feel a bit sort of shaky, but there's things that I've been building on well.
And this is just it, okay? You called it evolving, and that's such a brilliant word. This is an evolution, but it's an evolution after an atomic bomb, because everything you knew has been annihilated and you're left with nothing. You're looking around at the rubble of what you knew, and it's unrecognizable. And so the feeling of it being shaky and untethered, 100% appropriate. And I, do not like the word, but normal. And in response to the situation that you've experienced a huge amount of trauma and loss, and that's not of the relationships as well. I mean, it is the relationships, but it's also yourself in those things and the knowing of yourself. And when we grow up without an identity, we use external building blocks to build our identity, and when they're all suddenly removed, it's very, very discombobulating.
I love that word.
I know it's great, isn't it? But it also feels a little bit reductive. So I think it's like, because it feels a bit funny, but it really is just so disorientating.
Mm.
And so where you are in this process is completely natural. What I would love to offer you is taking some really active time to connect to these emotions, because there's a real danger of staying in that intellectual space, learning all the information, learning all the things, knowing and rationalizing and reasoning to avoid feeling.
Yeah.
And it's something a lot of people do, myself included, until we're ready to face the emotion. And it's also valid, I just want to say. Like, it's not that it's a bad thing, it's that it does inhibit you connecting to the emotion. And maybe that's what you need, just to be able to have a sense of safety before you connect to the emotion. But the emotion needs to be acknowledged too, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I have had troubles identifying the emotions because I've had to repress lots of emotions.
Right.
Times. So it does feel uncomfortable experiencing some of these emotions.
So one of the tools I'm going to offer you then, in terms of connecting to emotion, is the exercise with the feelings wheel that I'll do with a lot of my clients, which is we get the feelings wheel and we literally go every single word and notice where it's felt in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Think of a time where we might have felt it, even if we can't necessarily identify it, but what might make somebody feel that thing? What might somebody feel disgust or repulsion or fear or sadness or humiliation or disappointment? What if we can't relate it to ourselves, putting it to somebody else and noticing where they might feel it? And then on top of that, for identity building, is starting to notice all the little things throughout the day that you like or dislike, i.e., the one I always use is, like, when you wash your hands, do you prefer the water warm, cold? Do you like a basin of water? We hear Americans go on all the time about how we don't have mixer taps. I mean, I do in my house, but, the 2-tap thing. Do you like to fill the basin up before you wash your hands, or do you like to do it under running water? Do you prefer a shower or a bath? Do you like hot water, cold water? Noticing just tiny little things.
I'm noticing those things. Yeah,
Good.
and I've got mixer taps everywhere. I don't like.
But there you go, Americans, we do have them. But the point being, as you're walking through the day, you're noticing how you feel about certain things, everything that you do. Like, what is it about the top you're wearing that you like? Why do you like it? Is it the material? Is it the pattern? Is it the thing? asking yourselves all these questions and then going on to kind of deeper values and I used to do value cards that had all these different values on, but you could just Google a list of characteristics, value system, belief system things to look at each one and notice how many of them are important to you, how many are not important, and then more importantly, the ones that you think you should be, and then the ones you think you want to be. Because if we're looking at the shoulds, those are other people's expectations. And you need to ask yourself why you think you should be those things, if they're actually your feelings or somebody else's taught conditioning. And then the wants. And what is it about? Why do I want to be those things too? And what is it that I'm not doing that isn't? And what could I change to align with those more? So we're looking at really getting to know yourself in a really robust way and taking the time to do it, you know?
Well, yeah, I think that is starting to fall into place. So that's really good advice. I'm definitely going to look those things up. I've written some notes. So
before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered, that I haven't answered, that you need to go over? Anything at all?
No, it's been really interesting and validating, and thank you for the time and space to do this. Just
such a pleasure, Emma, and I'm really grateful. And I know I challenged you really hard in there at one point.
What's a bit scary at one point, but
yeah.
So
and notice even that what I hope you notice, and if it wasn't, then I absolutely will hear it. But what I hope you noticed was there was no judgment or shame from me. There was a desire to understand and the desire to show you what I was seeing. And, you know, that is maybe not how it was received, and that's valid as well. But and I'm absolutely accountable. And if I need to retune how I deliver stuff, totally valid. The noticing of the threat, though, of the challenge, the questioning of who you are, what's happening for you, the fear of being visible in that way. Really noticing that.
Yeah. I think it did bring up a few memories of when people had challenged me in similar ways and said the same phrases. So there was a bit of that to contend with as well. But I did manage to get through it and
you really did. You really did. And you know what's really important is that you noticed that was coming up, right? Because there's a thing about triggers is that if you don't realize what is being triggered, then it becomes in this relationship rather than that's my past experiencing informing how I'm feeling about this conversation. And that is absolutely fine for, if you're aware of it, because you can kind of take responsibility for that. But you could even let me know and go, I'm feeling really triggered because this is what I've experienced. And then I can pause and whatever we need to do.
No, it's just that word defensive has been thrown at me a few times, and I've felt,
but in a negative way,
difficult emotions with that. Yeah. So I don't think you were saying it in a negative way, but it just hit on a few memories as to when that had happened before. So, but I was able to think through it and understand where it was coming from. So that's amazing. That was fine.
The thing about it is just that, right? Is that I recognize why that would feel really difficult. That kind of you're being defensive, accusatorily, rather than I'm noticing defensiveness, which suggests there's pain, rather than shaming you for it. Do you know what I mean?
Defensiveness was because of the trauma that I'd experienced. So that was a natural thing to feel, wasn't it? And not necessarily a judgmental, feeling from you towards me. It was a recognition that is a normal way to feel.
Of course it is. You're protecting yourself.
Yeah.
That's literally what being defensive is. I am protecting myself.
Exactly.
And you don't know that I'm going to be safe with the things that you're protecting, right? So this is also really important that you listen to it. Because if someone comes at you going, oh my God, you're being so defensive in a really negative, judgy, shamey way, then fucking right you are. Because why would you
There's a
be
reason.
right? Why would you be open with somebody who is attacking you for protecting yourself?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm going to tell you something really horrible, but you're not allowed to defend yourself. You know,
I mean,
that doesn't make sense, does it?
No. So I genuinely had no problem with you being in that way. And if you'd have said, Helen, back off, I don't want to go there, fine. That's okay. I'm not going to punish you for that. I'm not going to abandon you for that. I might ask you what it is that you're fearful of and explore it with you, but I'm not going to shame you or humiliate you for it. What is amazing is that you could notice that in the moment, and that just speaks volumes to where you are in recovery.
It does. Yeah, thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Emma, thank you. I can't tell you, thank you so much for exploring, for being here, being honest, being brave, for all our tech issues that we've suffered together. And what I just offer you is that if you leave and you have any questions for clarification, let me know. We will be sending you a little email and with some follow-up info. And I'm here. If you want to ask for anything at all, do you just get in touch with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Well, everyone, with that, I guess all that remains to be said is take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.